Hello, everyone. It's time to get started. Our first talk is going to be given by Geir Arne Hjelle on plugins adding flexibility to your apps. Let's give him a big warm welcome.
Thank you so much. And yeah, a big thanks to the organizers for letting me speak here. So my name is Geir Arne Hjelle. I work together with the Real Python team to write articles. So this talk is partly based on at least some ideas in those articles. And what I'm going to talk about is essentially a very simple way to add flexibility and modularize your code. So something I call plugins. So the agenda for the talk is essentially I'll try to motivate a little bit why we should care about simple code, although I hope that's also slightly obvious. And then the main part of the talk will be actually giving an example of how to build a small app. We'll try to essentially see how we can make a small command line app that can plot your data, and how we can kind of modularize this to support different data formats, different kinds of plots, and those kind of things. And then towards the end, I'm just going to say a few words about a small package that kind of supports this kind of infrastructure. OK, so quick motivation. If you have modularized your code, typically what you end up with is something that's less complex. You may have more functions and things like this, but each function is doing one single thing. You have the single responsibility principle kind of built in there, and it's easy to reason about what your code is doing. That also makes everything much easier to maintain, easier to test, those kind of things, and easier to extend later, easier to add extra functionality. So what I'm kind of calling plugins here means, so essentially built on the system you'll see later, that your app can be controlled easily by configuration settings, for instance, or options to your code. You can easily extend and customize your app. Even you can let your users do this. And by having things modularized and nicely, things are better structured, and often typically means that you can also develop faster, especially if you're on a team. You can have people doing different kind of things without really butting heads against each other. OK, so let's actually do this. So what I want to do now is just show you how to build this simple plotter app. And what I want this to be is a small command line application that should be able to read data from a CSV file and plot data in a simple line graph. So nothing really revolutionary, but just to kind of have the example going. So what I'm going to do here, and let's see, we can even make this slightly bigger, is just code up this little plotter function that I have. And what I want this to do is going to be a command line app. So I'm just going to use a sweet little library called click. And what this does is that I can add this small decorator on top and say that this is a command, like this. And then I can go to my command line and say that I want to run this. And of course, not much happened. But if I do help here, you can see that I already got some help message popped in here. So this is done just by calling this a click command. And before I actually continue here, because I'm going to use these decorators a little bit, so let me just stop here and take a half-a-minute crash course in what a decorator is. So the thing you saw with the @ symbol on top there is called a decorator. And what this is really just a function that you can use to wrap another function. And what it does is essentially you have your original function, and then you call your decorator function on it. So a decorator is really just a function that takes a function as an argument and returns a function. And what you the thing you get out is the decorated function. So why do you want to do this? Well, you can add common functionality across many functions and methods. So the example here is that we're taking a regular function, the main function I had, and making it into a command that you can run on the command line. And as I said, what Python is doing is the decorated equals decorator of the original function, but the typical way that you write it is using this Py syntax, or @ symbol syntax like we see here. OK, if you want to learn a lot more about the Python decorators, we have an article that I wrote on Real Python, so you can go really into the depths there. OK, so back to our demo. OK, I have this command, and I want to read in a data file. So that means that I need to take this in as an argument. So I'll have here the argument of a file path. And this magically pops into my main method then handled by click. And then I prefer my file paths to be pathlib paths. So pathlib is a somewhat new library in the standard library. It was introduced in Python 3.4. And it makes it so much nicer to work with file paths. So I'll just convert the string that I'm really getting in here to a pathlib. So we have the file path like this. And then what do I want to do? Well, I want to read my data. So let's just read data from the file path. And when I have the data, I want to create a plot. So this is essentially the script I want. But of course, now we need to add in those two methods, read data and create plot. And those are fairly simple. So I first have my read data. It takes in a file path. And let's see, what do we want this one to do? I want this to read, in this case, actually CSV data, and return a pandas data frame. And with the magic of pandas, this is fairly simple. I just need to do return pandas, read CSV of the file path. And now I've gotten another dependency here, so let's import pandas. Like this. Okay, so now I have my data, and they're stored now in the data frame. So the next thing I want to do, if we go back to down here, is that we need to create the plot, or something like this. So let's add that. So I'm getting the data, and I want to plot them. And again, through magic of pandas, this is fairly simple. We just do data plot. And finally, I want to just make sure that I show the plots. So then I'm using matplotlib. So we need to import that as well. So let's see, matplotlib. Like this. OK, so now we created a small app. Let's be good citizens and document this one as well. So plot the pandas data frame. And when we have all of this set up, we should be able to run this. So this is, I guess, the exciting part of the talk. So first of all, now we can see that click has actually told me that, OK, I need a file path. So that's cool. And then I should have some data hidden away here. So I have a CSV file with the iris data. It's a fairly well-known data set about some iris flowers. And when we run this, we get our plot up. So far, we built a fairly simple app. OK, no plugins, nothing magic really happening here, but just, OK, we have something up and running. So let's now expand this. Let's say that, OK, I have JSON data, I have data in some weird format over there. And of course, if we try this, so let's say that I have the iris data also as a JSON file. And if I plot this, of course, it won't work because I'm expecting to get the CSV file. So I want now to be able to expand the plotter app so I can support more file formats. I want to be able to support more kinds of plots, not just the line plot I had there, and possibly add in some control on which kind of data I want to plot and all those kind of things. We probably won't be able to do all of these things, but a few things at least, fairly quickly. So let's see. Let's see if we can, instead of just reading CSV data here, see that we want to read at least CSV and JSON. All kinds of data would be fun. And one way to do this then is that, OK, I need to figure out which format do I have here. So this is one of the neat things with this. With pathlib is that I can just ask for the file suffix. And that would be .csv or .json. So I'll strip off the dot. And then I can just do if format is CSV. Then we're doing the same kind of thing, right? While if our format is JSON, then we should do something else. And in this case, we can just create a JSON dictionary, or a dictionary from a JSON, I guess, using the JSON library. And then I just, again, with the pathlib, I can just read this in as a text string, like this, and then pandas can create a data frame from this. So if we do this, and then JSON dict, that should work. Now we need to import JSON, like this. And I guess, again, we could be nice citizens and raise an error if this goes wrong. Something like format not supported. Okay, so now, hopefully my CSV will still work, so I can still read a CSV file. And let's see if I can now read the JSON file as well. Yes, so now we got both of these, and I have, just for fun, we also have a bigger JSON file with more data. That's not really that important for now, but okay. This is fine, I can keep doing this, right? In a typical application, handling a format might be more work than just the one line, read a CSV, read a JSON, and so on. So this will be terrible to maintain after a while. If I have 10 different formats, maybe each of them takes 5, 10 lines to do something with. This doesn't really work. So what we want to do is actually modularize this out so that the read data is not responsible for handling 10 different formats, but that we have one function that kind of handles each format. So if we do that, let's say that we then create ourselves a readers module that can read data from different formats. And if I now, let's see, I'll just go here and then I copy the code that we have here and throw this into this one and say that, okay, this should now be a function that's responsible for reading a file, read CSV file, and return data frame. Okay, and then I have a second function that reads a file path. So this should read JSON file and return data frame. And this is almost like this. Let's see. One small little thing here is that actually I get my JSON function and the JSON library kind of name clash there. So I'll just call the JSON library JSON lib. Do this, and then we need pandas. Like this. Okay. So now I moved the functionality out, so I have nice small little modular functions that have one single thing that they want to do. How do I actually now call this from a main code? Because now I don't need these things. Instead, I want to import my readers, the module I just created, and so somehow I now need to call the correct function here. So one way to do this could be that I get a function that has the name of the format from my readers module. And then I'll just, let's see, I'll call that function. So let's see. So if we do this, now what I'm doing here is that I'm getting, for instance, a CSV function from the readers module, and I'm calling that with the file path. So if we, let's see if that still works. So this now, what this has just done is now actually call the readers JSON function through this getattr thing. So this is definitely better. Now we kind of move the responsibility away. So now the only thing that's a little bit nasty here is that this looks a little bit cryptical for your readers. So if you kind of come into your code and say, okay, what happened here? So what would be lovely to do here is that we would, instead in kind of main application, be able to write something like readers, read CSV from file path. So if I could change this kind of slightly scary get after thing and so on to something like this, that would be even nicer. So let's see. One way to do this, so what I'm actually doing now is I'm kind of moving a little bit of the, say, the scary code that I have in my main application out to the out to my data file, or my readers file here. And then I need to have a function here called read, which takes in the name of a format, or I'll actually start calling this now a plugin. And then it will take whatever arguments and keyword arguments that it's given and just pass this on to the function that it wants to call. So here again, I could do the same thing where I do some kind of get attr to do this, but instead what I want to do here is that I'll create myself just a dictionary that's a list of all the reader functions that are available. And then I could look up in this dictionary for a function and then call my arguments and keyword arguments. And if we'll go back to actually do a slight amount of error handling, we can do something like this. If it's there, and if it's not, we should raise a type error. Saying something like, let's see, plugin not available. And let's see, finally, this should actually return. There we go. So now I have something that can call these functions down here, which is kind of what I wanted to do over here. What's missing now is actually populating the dictionary. So if you see here now, the reader's dictionary is empty, and I never do anything to actually put the functions in there. So now I need to just populate it, and that's where we come back to our decorators that I mentioned earlier. So I said a decorator is just a function that takes a function as an argument and returns a function. So what I want to do now is just create a decorator that just registers the plugins. So I want to populate my reader's dictionary, and I'll do that by picking out the name of each function and having that point to the function itself. And then as a decorator, it should return a function. So I just return the same function without doing anything to it. And what this allows me to do now is just say that I want to register the CSV and the JSON functions here as plugins. So when this code now is imported, what happens here is that the register function is called here and puts the CSV into the reader's dictionary with the link to the function itself. And similarly for JSON. So let's see. So now we have code here that says, okay, pick out the format and then call the right reader. And let's see if this works. Else raise. Yeah, there's a colon missing there. There we go. And there's even more stuff happening. Data is not returned. Let's see, where did we not return? Ah, yeah. Sorry, in the main? Ah, you're correct. There we go. Thank you so much. There we go. Now we have it. So let's see what we actually have done here now. So now I kind of moved the complexity that I started to grow as I wanted to support more formats out of my kind of main file. I have my main structure going. It's moved over to the to my module here, where I have each little function doing just one single thing. So now we have a lot of modularized code, so it's much easier to handle. I could now, let's see, if we go back to what we were talking about, I want to also support more kinds of plots. I could then add a plotter functionality that kind of works the same way. And what I would end up doing is typically that, okay, these things on top here, I could just copy these guys over into, say, a plotters module. Let's see here. So if I have a Pluggers module like this, then I could copy this thing into here and probably want to change the names to something that's plotters. There we go. And then I could do the same for the plots. So I have line plots, I would have scatter plots, all kind of plots here. Now this is a small code smell, right? So I have a fair bit of setup that I don't want to copy around and things like this. So what we have instead is a small little package. It's called PIPlugs that is available on PyPI, which is a simple decorator-based plugin architecture for Python. And it essentially works with things that, like what you've seen here, you can create simple plugin packages. Instead of stuffing everything into the same file like I did here, what I typically do is actually move it up a level so that I have a plugin package, so full directory with readers. So with this kind of setup, let me actually show it to you. PyPlugs, there we go. So here is a implementation of the same thing, but using the PyPlugs package. So in this case, what I've done is that I've actually taken each of the readers and split them out into their own files. So then I create a plugin package that I call readers and plugin package called plotters. And then the plugins is typically the whole module, but with a called function in between. And then it's possible to also add in several functions if you want. But typically the way it's looked at is with packages and then plugins, I believe. And the code, so let me show you that. So if we first look at the plotter.py, so this is the simple plotting application, and it's exactly the same as what we have done. So you can see here I import readers. Readers is now packaged, not just a module, and then I call readers read with the reader I want, and then it runs off. How does the CSV thing look? So as you can see, this is now very small. The only thing you need to do is import PyPlugs and use the register decorator. And this does essentially the same thing as the register thing we wrote. It adds a little bit more bookkeeping, so we can also pick out doc strings and things like this, have those easily available. And then in the readers .init file, so this is the one that defines the package, and then when I have the read function inside of there, that's just a call function, so call a plugin. So you can see there's a call factory that just creates call functions. So for readers, it's nice to call it read, makes it more humanized, I guess. The names factory would just list the available names that you have. There's a doc factory and things like this. Okay, so with plugins like this, I've been using it now for several years in different projects, and it works really nicely. We used it for readers for different file formats. So one thing you kind of need to be careful with there is that you have a well-defined interface into your readers, right? So in this case, we had readers should take in a file path and return a data frame, for instance. If you don't have the same interface for all of them, it will be a hassle to keep track of. But if you have sort of like equal things that you want to call like this, this makes a lot of sense. We used it for different models, for flexible calculations. I can then, in my config file, say that I want to use this or that, say, machine learning library to call my models or things like this. Filters, writers for storing data in different formats. Notifiers for sending notifications to different places. And also for components, just for building my GUI. So I can kind of say, okay, for this use case, I want to have these kind of buttons, this drop down, and things like this. Okay, so let's finish up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And if you want to know more, you'll find me at Geir Hjelle, Hjelle, at most places. The code here I'll put up on GitHub. PyPlugs is, as I said, on PyPI. And I write for Real Python, so you can find more articles there, including some that at least mention these kind of plugins. So thank you very much.
If anyone has any questions, please come up to the mic, and please remember to put your question in the form of a question.
So maybe I missed something, but in the PIPlugs readers module, or it was a readers init under init module, I think. I didn't see you importing any of the submodules there.
Right.
Does it? So it just imports it, or because you seem to be kind of flipping the import? Does it just dynamically import when it needs to, or how does that importing process work?
Exactly. Yeah, so you can see it just imports PyPlugs, and then the crucial thing here is actually that it sends off a reference to this directory, essentially, with the package reference there, to the PyPlugs thing. So when things are actually called, it will go, it knows that because, well, I have the package, and I'm looking for a file, a module inside of this package, and then it will dynamically import that package. And then what, for instance, this names factory, which is just listing everything, it will just go in the folder and actually import all the files it sees there. So that will be a fairly slow process, possibly if you have lots of sub-imports. But the call just goes directly to the module file. And that's also one of an extra bonus, I guess, with moving everything up to the module level instead of the function level, is that you can go directly to the function you need. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. If you were to allow external plugins in your application, external as in I can write a plugin for different types of files and plug it into your application, how would you do that with PyPlugs?
So essentially what you need to expose is the register thing. So what I've done, I think, is that you would typically just say that have a directory for custom plugins, and then have them just import the PyPlugs register there, and then it will, you can set it up so that it picks up that package as well, essentially. And there is a very nice example, an application called Glue for visualization. It's part of the Anaconda distribution that does exactly this thing. It doesn't use PyPlugs, but it uses essentially the same kind of system in the background, where you can add your own data readers. So, yeah.
Hi. How do you feel about setup tools entry points? We have had these for years, and they work pretty well for setting up a plugin system.
Right. No, there are many different plugin systems, and I haven't used setup tools entry points outside of setting up entry points, essentially. So I don't know if that could kind of do some of these things. I think this is at a different level.
The thing is, with setup tools entry points, you don't actually have to explicitly import your plugins. They can be auto-discovered.
Right. Yeah, I don't know enough about that to say much.
You mentioned PyPlugs works great when you have a consistent method signature for all the different plugins.
Yep.
Many real-world examples, that may not be the case. Like the CSV reader may take into delimiter how strings are escaped, where JSON, those parameters make no sense. Is
exactly.
PyPlugs not really extended that case, or how would you go about that?
So let's see if we have this here. So if we, let's have a look at the readers.py. So what really happens in the read case is that it just passes through whatever arguments it has. So if you on the outside knows that, okay, for CSV I have this and that argument, you can just pass it through and it should work. So it's just that you need to keep track of it on your side. You can't just switch between the formats as easily.
Okay. So like in a CLI, you might have like plugin args as another parameter, and it can take anything.
Exactly. Okay. So you can kind of pass them on. Okay. Thank you so much.